So yesterday, Joe Biden revealed his economic stimulus plan for the United States of America. We're going to go through much of it, and I'm going to tell you what I think was good and maybe not so good from this economic stimulus plan. You're probably going to disagree with me on some of them and agree with me on some of them, and that's okay. And after we reach the end of it, I'm going to tell you exactly where I think this is going to go next, how it's going to proceed forward, the timeline we're looking at for another stimulus check for you and the American people. First off, the cost of the plan itself, $1.9 trillion. In my opinion, that is too high. This is the reason why. Because we need something that can make it through the Congress and get back to Joe Biden to be signed off as a bill. $1.9 trillion right now in the political environment we have with the amount of stimulus plans that we've already passed seems to me to be a little too high to ensure that this will pass through Congress and get the American people another stimulus check. I think that's the most important thing. And if we're going to block that by making a bill that's out of reach, then it becomes pointless. I really wish that Joe Biden would have offered something a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more focused on specifically the individual American person. Next, he did have in those additional stimulus checks for the American people, probably right around $400 billion of the $1.9 trillion for that. I believe that's very good. The American people should get that $1,400 and it should be extended to all dependents, including adult dependents. He had $350 billion for state and local governments. I believe this is right on. I know that there's some people who are upset with this. They feel like it's bailing out the state and local governments. But come on, let's be honest. We just went through a pandemic. Businesses were closed down. Tax revenue was lost. There was a lot of medical expenses, school expenses, police expenses, fire expenses that none of these states were prepared to handle. And I believe $350 billion is the right thing to do to get these states back on track and to help them pay for many of the expenses that they had to go through. He also has $170 billion for K through 12 schools. Now, in my opinion, this is a little bit unnecessary and a little high. I think $50 billion is a better number. And here's the reason why. I am a teacher, so no, I'm not against schools or anything like that. I'm a public school teacher. I think schools are great. Here's the problem. He's already has $350 billion for state and local governments. Those state and local governments should be using the portion they get of that $350 billion to go back into school funding. This is just additional state and local government aid, essentially, for schools. And so I think $170 billion is a little too high. I get the importance of helping schools out, but $50 billion is more appropriate and allows the bill to actually get through. What good is $350 billion for state and local government and $170 billion for schools going to be if the bill doesn't actually make it through the Congress? That's really my point. He had $70 billion for COVID testing and vaccine distribution. I think that's pretty good, probably a little high. $50 billion would have been a little better in my opinion, but I do think that that's important, needs to be in there. He had a child tax credit fully refundable and a little additional amount for those under 6 years of age. I like that. That's a good idea. It helps families. It helps kids. Extend the eviction and foreclosure moratoriums until September. I think that's a very good idea. We need to protect those who are renting, who are in trouble. We also need to protect our landlords and provide for them because they're going to be losing out on income. So I think that's a good idea. I think there should be money there for landlords and to protect those who could be evicted. He also wants to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour. I am personally not a fan of this. The reason being, I think this should be much more of a state thing. Yes, there should be a federal minimum wage, but New York is very different than Wyoming. So if the federal minimum wage in Wyoming now is $15 and then the minimum wage in New York is $15, to me, that's a little unbalanced. I think the minimum wage in New York should be higher, maybe even higher than $15 in certain areas, like New York City probably should be higher than $15. But in Wyoming, $15 is going to go a very long way. And in all places in each of the states aren't even equal either. So I don't really like the $15 minimum wage. That's a battle that can be waged later on. I don't think it should be part of this economic stimulus bill. Again, I think it's going to cause a roadblock in the way of actually getting help to people who need it now. Yes, a lot of people might look at this and say, this is a great idea. What a great idea, but if it doesn't make it through Congress, it makes everything else pointless. I don't think this is the place to put this in, and I think this is a much bigger discussion to be had, and probably not as cut and dry as many people would think it would be just simply because of the diversity of the United States of America and how many places are very different from other places. He also wants to increase the unemployment to $400 per week, and it's at $300 per week. I am not a fan of that. I actually think that the unemployment is pretty good right now, and I think that we should be focusing much more on getting Americans back to work, especially with the vaccine distribution. Now, depending on how you feel about the vaccine, that's your opinion and stuff. Obviously, take it with a grain of salt. I am watching to see how everything's going down, and then after everything if it looks good and all of the results seem to be good, then we take that data into account and we make the decision for ourselves. But the goal shouldn't be increasing unemployment at this point. The goal should be encouraging people to go back to work. I wish he would have come up with a little bit of a different program maybe to get people to be incentivized to go back to work, because there are a lot of people who need individuals to work at jobs, and the unemployment being so high, it does stagnate that a little bit. It's just the facts. What's going to happen next? His bill, or at least the outline of his bill, is going to make it into the House. Nancy Pelosi and the House leaders are going to draft up a thousands of page new economic stimulus relief bill. They're going to change things around. They're going to take things out. They're going to add things in. They're going to restructure it. They're going to modify it. It could even be higher than $1.9 trillion once they're done. Or maybe if they want to be a little bit more conservative, they might lower the number a little bit. I don't think they will. It'll probably be a little bit higher or right around the $1.9 trillion. And they're probably going to be done with structuring this new bill, thousands of pages, by early February. And once they get that out there, they're going to vote on it. Maybe by mid-February, the House will vote and pass whatever bill they come up with. That will be sent off to the Senate, in which it will face a much more difficult and uphill battle because it needs 60 votes to get through the Senate, and it's a 50-50 split right now, with many Democrats who are pausing at even putting through numbers like $1.9 trillion. I don't think it's going to be able to pass the Senate for the reasons that I stated. I know he wants to put a lot of things in there, but sometimes less is more when you need to get help to the American people right away in a very specific way, like more stimulus checks for the American people and help to the states and local governments and help for the vaccines. And when you inflate the cost of things too much because you're too ambitious, sometimes being too ambitious can actually hurt people. And I think it's going to be a little too ambitious. I think there's going to be a little too much thrown in there that doesn't need to be thrown in there. And it's going to stall it in the Senate, at which point there's going to be back and forth. There's going to be blame. There's going to be politics. You all know how that's going to go. It's going to go back to the House. And then I don't know what's going to happen. I don't think the House is going to restructure it to try to get it under a $1 trillion number or $1 trillion or something like that. I think they're going to attempt to go for the budget reconciliation route, which we have been telling you on this channel was designed in the 1980s to push through bills in the Senate by only a majority vote. So they would just need the majority. However, it's still going to be difficult to push it through with a majority because you still have Senate Democrats who are moderate who might not want something like this, never mind the Republicans. So we're going to have to see how this plays back and forth. But regardless, more stimulus is coming down the road for you. I just wish that they would restructure this in a way where it would actually make it through much quicker, even though that means that there might be less available for some of these programs that they want to throw money at. But when American people need money now, when they need a check now, and when state and local governments need help now, and the vaccine distribution needs help now, I think that's more important than $15 minimum wage. I get it. Maybe important, but maybe a bill you do in the summer. You know what I mean? Maybe not attach it to this. $400 unemployment. I just don't see it. I think people need to get back to work right now. I get maybe some of the apprehension out there. I know some people are going to be against this, but I can tell you there are work available signs out there that are not being filled right now because a lot of people are just staying at home and they have good reason to stay at home, but I don't know that we should be encouraging it. I think that we should be shifting our focus, and we can get a little bit more progressive to encouraging people to go back to work somehow. And maybe we can design something a little bit better than just increasing the unemployment at this point. I think the unemployment should have been $600 during a large portion of this, but now I think we should be shifting out of that, not increasing it. Again, that's my opinion. You can disagree with me if you want to. Unfortunately, I think some of the things that are in there, if they stay in there, are going to stall it out in the Senate and ultimately hurt the American people, which is not what I want. I want people to get more help because I know how much that $1,400 is going to help. I know how much that tax credit for kids is going to help. I know how much that state and local government aid is going to help. The additional aid for public schools is going to help. And if we inflate things too much, then we're going to miss out on the help. I don't want it to fall short again now because there's just too much thrown into it. Let's make it reasonable and let's get the help to the American people quickly and readily available to them as they need it, which is right now, rather than stalling things out through the process. As this all unfolds, we will keep you informed here. As always, I will catch you next time.